Any questions? Yes.
Two things come to mind. One, in analyzing what you said, as the totality there, I got the feeling that everything, the devil is around for each one of us. And the second question, more or less, is in my own life, I have found it very hard, and I find it hard in this diocese especially, to find any spiritual direction, you know. A spiritual director is a special gift from God, I think. You know.
Yeah, it is.
That's
yeah, finding a good director is very difficult. I always tell people to find one. Go to confession to various priests, and whichever one, not hopping from priest to priest, but try different priests out and what advice they give you in the confession is generally the kind of advice you're going to get in spiritual direction, which in my experience means there's very few of them. They're good at it.
What about the devil part there? Is this, you get the impression that everything you said, he's not talking about something over there that happened, these people. This is happening to us.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Ordinary temptation is happening to all of us. There's some people who are diabolically obsessed and they don't even know it. So, but we're all suffering from diabolic obsession. By the way, the five of the six, ordinary diabolic temptation, is what everybody suffers, and it's ordinary, which means it's common every day. Whereas the other five are considered extraordinary. And they're extraordinary in two ways. One, they're above and beyond what's ordinary, but it's also extraordinary in the sense of it being rare. Everybody is tempted, not everybody is diabolically obsessed. So, yes?
So every now and then I'll meet someone who will tell me that they suffer from panic attacks, and I'm finding it to be more and more common. I'm hearing more about people who have these, and they are also talking about how they're diagnosed with depression or anxiety. Is there any direct correlation between depression and panic attacks?
For diabolic obsession, yes. Let me just first preface it by saying this. Every form of mental illness and every form of medical illness can either be caused or mimicked by demons. That does not mean that every person who has psychological problems or medical problems that it's from a diabolic cause. Some people think the problem is just natural. So, let me give you an example. There's a guy who came to me who was hearing voices and he thought maybe he was possessed. I said, well, first of all, they had him send the psychologicals and a psychiatric makeup, and found out that he started hearing the voices from drug use. It was drug-induced psychosis, basically. So I said, well, there's an outside chance, there is a medical condition that causes that, but then I also thought to myself, well, maybe sometimes you'll get that where the demons will kind of mimic that stuff. So I said to him, what do the voices sound like? They said, George Bush and Ronald Reagan. And then I said, well, what are they telling you? To vote Republican. I think your problem is possession. Oh my God. By the way, you might want to listen to those voices in your head. No, I'm just okay. So in other words, people's problems can be purely natural. Other times they can be purely psychological or psychiatric. Other times it can be entirely diabolic, so that the panic attacks and the things that the people are suffering. So for example, I'm working with one of my spiritual directees. I agreed to take him on for a very distinct reason, but he suffers from panic attacks. He suffered from those. And after doing a lot of lessons over him, he did not show the signs that it was diabolic at all. It was purely a natural phenomenon that he was dealing with. And it had to do, we did trace it back. We do know what the psychological cause is, and so now he's able to slowly but surely kind of get on his feet. There's other people, though, that suffer from panic attacks and do the blessings over them, and boom, it just stops. So you have to do that. Now, a lot of people, sometimes it's mixed. Sometimes people, because of the diabolic obsession, they've obsessed for so long, they've now developed psychological problems by the habituation of their own minds. So then people say, well, how can you really distinguish one from the other? Well, in diabolic obsession, which is distinct from psychological obsession. Psychological obsession is a habit of the mind, where the person's in the habit of thinking something. So, let's take an example of PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. What that is the cogitative power that has that power of making association. It becomes hypervigilant in constantly making associations in relationship to a specific set of criteria. So guys go off to war, they're constantly being vigilant, watching for the bombs and watching for their buddies and watching it, so that when they come off of that, it's in the habit of mind. And so there's this, and the stress is watching for the danger. So that once they come off of that, that cogitative power is still in the habit. Right? So it's a psychological thing. There is a form of PTSD that is entirely diabolic. I only discovered this when I was a pastor. Numerous guys in my parish had gone off to the Afghan war, and when they came back, they were all suffering from the exact same thing. And one of the guys started telling me about his dreaming pattern. I said, that does kind of sound like it's diabolic. I didn't tell him that. I said, why don't you come in and we'll do this blessing. So I did a minor exorcism over him twice, and the PTSD was completely gone. And he didn't do anything. No therapy, no nothing. So what you'll see is when the person's problem is psychological, the problem perdures. It doesn't change much. The only time it changes by is environmental factors. Or maybe there can also be some medical conditions which can kind of cause things to kind of ebb and flow. But it'll be very consistent, and it'll only vary just a little bit depending on environmental factors. When you're talking about diabolic obsession, it's more like this. Because Christ does not allow the demon to be at the person all the time. And so they'll go through periods of lucidity where they seem almost symptom-free, and then they'll go through periods where they're obsessing. They can't get their mind off of it. And then, all of a sudden, boom, it breaks, and then they go through periods of lucidity again. And these can ebb and flow as the time between those two. That's one of the signs. Now, does anybody recognize what that looks like? Bipolar. I discovered this the first year I was an exorcist. That, by the way, I'm not implying that all bipolar is diabolic. But every single person who came to me that was on meds for bipolar got off their meds in 5 months if we did the exorcisms regularly and if they did a certain set of things on their side. Every one of them. What does that tell you? It tells you that, well, first of all, we have to understand that bipolar is one of those categories, right? It's one of those broad categories, like, oh, you have mood swings or bipolar. Get in there. I mean, there's no real, it's one of those broad categories that can include a variety of different things. But one of the ways that you confirm that it's diabolic is this. When the person is going through a really bad state, they're in a really bad state and it's been going on for a few days, tell them, come in and we'll do the blessing. You'll do the minor exorcism, you'll impose hands, ask God for the protection, and then all of a sudden the person will literally feel a lift. And they feel fine. And then a few days, it comes back again. And so that's one of the signs that you'll see when it's diabolic obsession. As the person begins doing what they need to do, they'll kind of go up and down, and they start climbing their way up. They'll get to the very top, and they seem completely symptom-free for a month or so, and then all of a sudden they're going to have 1 or 2 really bad dips. I don't know why, but exorcists have noticed that they see that towards the very last end of it. As long as they maintain their prayers, they're okay. Now, one of the things that is important about this is that pattern, I noticed this about 3 years ago. That pattern of going through being down and then, you do the exorcisms and they have this lucidity for a while, and the more you do it, the longer it gets between times, so that you know that it's a spiritual thing. Whereas if it's psychological and you pray with a person, they're just in flatline. They might feel a little better because they've had social interaction, but it doesn't change anything at all. Whereas if they have a period of lucidity, they feel great for a little while, symptom-free. Oh, I think it's wrong, Father. Or it's gone. Well, let's wait. Let's see. Right? And sometimes it does. You just say the blessings over them once and it blows it out. Other times it takes a number of exorcisms over a period of time in order for it to finally get out. But this other pattern of this, you see in confession. people will be struggling with a mortal sin. They'll commit the mortal, they'll commit the mortal sin, they go to confession, all of a sudden, boom, they still feel free for about 3 or 4 days, and all of a sudden the temptation set in that are really hard again, then they fall, they go to confession again, and then boom, after the confession they feel symptom free again. It's the same pattern. And the reason is because confession has the same effect very often that exorcism does. So whenever I see a guy going through that pattern, I'll tell him, make an appointment with me and come talk to me if you like. And I think I might have a blessing that can help you, and we need to discuss what I think your problem is. Because it's very often a form of diabolic obsession. Now, again, I'm not implying that even a majority of cases of psychological illness are diabolic obsession. I don't know what the statistic actually is. But I do know that a lot of people are becoming diabolically obsessed because of the evil things that they're committing, and they're getting sucked into certain things. So that's why the demons are getting their foot in the door. Yes?
Yes, I had a question, and I'm asking this because I'm a physician, and you said every medical problem can be potentially from a demon.
It can be.
Can you explain that? Like, say somebody has abdominal pain.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you could find an anatomic or physiologic abnormality to account for that,
That's correct.
then it's not from a demon. Are you talking about things that can't be explained medically, or can demons cause you to have appendicitis? Is what I'm saying.
They can cause both. But the way the church has always approached it, though, is if you have a medical condition, you go to a medical doctor, because most medical conditions are purely medical and not diabolic. But some are. So the demons can cause appendicitis. The demons can cause certain things to happen so that the person ends up with certain problems. Or they can mimic certain kinds of symptomology. Some people will go, the doctor says, we're not finding anything, we just think it's all in your head. Well, it could be in your head, but it could also be something from a diabolic cause sometimes. Let me give you an example of a case. The people in Memphis have this idea that I have the gift of healing, which is silly. I have nothing of the sort. What charismatic grace do you have?
Zippo.
I'm a rock. I walk into houses that are full-blown infested and I don't even feel a thing. Right? Okay. What happened is that they brought to me this guy who was in 4th stage pancreatic cancer. And they said, would you be willing to pray over him? Thinking about it. I mean, my father has a gift of healing. I said, yeah, okay. So I did the minor exorcism over him, imposed hands on him, and asked God to remove any demons that might be the possible if this was from a diabolic cause. A week later, the doctor said, we can't find any trace of pancreatic cancer. So, seems extraordinary. This has happened, I don't know why it is in Memphis and things, those people must be under some sort of diabolic attack, because every time I go there, I'm picking all the people up medically. The doctors are probably like, why is our business down? But normally speaking, if you have a medical condition, you go to a doctor. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to rule out the natural conditions first, and then you might consider something else. But this is also why the gift of, or the sacrament of anointing works. It works in 2 ways. One, it works because on rare occasions God will heal through the sacrament, but on other occasions the sacrament itself will blow the demon out, so it gets him out of the person, so the person can. So once the demon is out, then the body's ability to recoup will do it on its own. Whereas if it's a gift of healing, the person is immediately restored to health immediately, normally speaking. Okay. So they can cause it, and I'm not suggesting that every time you see a patient, you're like, okay, you've got a demon there, buddy. In fact, the only time I would suggest that you do that is if you came across a medical condition that was not responding to the meds that always work. Does that make sense? Because demons can block the ability of medication to work.
How common is diabolical possession, other than the common type that you said we all have, the temptations? I mean, are you seeing 2 people a week or 2 people a year?
I do between 50 and 70 evaluations a year, but I have to travel a lot because of my work. The other priests who work with me also do about that same amount, a little bit more. One of the priests there is, he's got some degrees in psychology, so I have him take a look at certain kinds of cases because I just don't have time to sit down with the people. We analyze about 150 cases a year. That 150 cases is after a very extensive vetting process. We probably get about 10 phone calls a week from around the country.
And of the 150 a year, how many do you finally decide probably are possession?
3 last year were possessed out of 150. So it's a very low rate. Diabolic obsession, though, is much higher for people diabolically obsessed. That's about 25% of cases. But you have to remember, we're already doing a vetting process. And usually when people contact us, they've already been through the medical stuff and been through this whole time, send your medicals, send the psychiatric workup, send the psychological workup. So we'll have them do that, send it to us so that we get a chance to take a look at it. And those things are very helpful for us because people are saying, well, if you're an exorcist, why are you looking at the psychological? Because demons will mimic certain patterns, but that mimicry means there's a little difference, and sometimes you can catch those. Especially if the reports are well done, if there's well annotated, you can usually kind of sort things out a little quicker. Yes.
And when you say diabolically obsessed, do you mean that they're thinking they have a demon?
No, it means that they can't get their mind off of certain things.
That. Okay.
It looks just like the psychological obsession, except it ebbs and flows much more.
Okay, so
Yeah.
have you had obsessive compulsive disorder patients
Yes.
that you determined were demons?
Yes.
Okay.
But you do both. Some is just psychological, because part of the reason that what we do is the vetting process is we do extensive interviews before they even show up off the stick. One of the things we need to do is, if we think there's diabolic obsessions, we need to know their psychological history in order to see if there was something that established the pattern, so that it probably was just a learned habit. Or if, say, there was a traumatic event that happened to the person that could result in something that's psychological, but it could also, which is true, but it can also result in the demon getting their foot in the door. So you just have to spend some time. And ultimately, when you think that there's something there, the real telltale sign is the prayer. If you're going to pray, certain things are going to happen. If it's just, if it's purely medical, or if it's purely psychological, you're praying, you're not going to see any change. Yes?
I'm a medical provider at the child psychiatric hospital in town, and a lot of our kids have been severely traumatized. Some of them have even been used in rituals of some sort, and some are obviously very mentally ill. But I was wondering if you saw much of a difference in the way that the diabolical manifests in adults versus children and adolescents.
The manifestations are pretty much the same. However, unless it's satanic ritual abuse, my experience is that if a child is possessed or diabolically obsessed, the cleanup operation is much shorter than it is adults. That's my experience. And a lot of that has to do with just the mercy of God, but a lot of it also has to do with the fact that the child they can't cooperate with the processes volitionally. I mean, they can cooperate and sit and let you say the prayers over them, but they don't. You can't sit there and sit them down and say, okay, Johnny's 5 years old. Okay, Johnny, I want you to do 5 hours of meditation a day. I used to do it. Not that I always recommend that, but I'm just saying that they just can't work with you the same way that adults can. The other thing is, too, is that a lot of times once the demon gets their foot in the door, they'll drive the person to commit a lot of mortal sins, and so there's a lot of traction that the demon's gotten over the person to the committing of their mortal sins. Whereas with children, it's less volitional, and so he has less traction. Yes?
What happens if somebody dies and they're possessed?
It
Or
depends.
they're liberated?
It depends. If they're in the state of grace, they go to heaven. Because grace is in the soul, possession's in the body. So, yes.
Are there some initial tests that you might do to weed out the majority of people who think they're possessed but aren't?
Yeah, for me, I just sit and listen to them. I'll just tell them, okay, tell me what I need to hear. And I tell them, don't spare it, because the devil's in the details, literally. So you just let them talk. And over the course of time, after you write 3 books of psychology and you've dealt with, thousands of people in this area, you get a pretty quick sense of being able to line up, okay, this is probably this, or this. There's some cases once in a while, I just don't really know, but that's where the prayer is really key. So the test is really, for me, the initial test is just listening to their story, because that will tell you a lot.
Do you ever do a little test like this is holy water and this isn't, and see if they know which one is which?
We do certain tests like that, but usually that's only for people who it looks like there could be possession, but we're not real sure. If they're possessed, the demon's going to know if what you're saying is Latin as prayer or not, or if he's going to know if this which is blessed and which isn't. So yeah, we do that on occasion. I don't use it until I get to a stage where I need to make some kind of determination, like this is on the borderline, I'm not really sure. For me, I won't engage in solemn exorcism until I see a clear preternatural sign. But that doing those, I don't do those in the initial stages. Now, some priests will take, they'll have people come into a room and they'll actually put like a Benedict medal underneath one of the chairs and then invite them to sit in one of the chairs, and then, you know, or he'll put Benedict medals in all the chairs except for one, and if the person goes and sits in the one that's not, then he says, well, that could be a sign. But again, you have to kind of be careful of that too. So, yes.
You mentioned that one of the reasons that a person can have a demon is that God allowed it for sanctification or spiritual growth in that person.
Yes.
And so if that occurs, and say something like that low back thing that you mentioned, okay, so how does the person battle that? With an exorcism, with medical treatment? Do they pray or just accept it?
I'm sorry, what was that they have what particular problem?
Like that low back thing that you were saying, that the lady has something in her low back.
The demon on her
Lower back.
Oh, on the lower back.
Yeah. So, you know, so how do you determine which ones are for their spiritual growth?
Well, they all are, ultimately.
And what are you, how does the, like, determining if an exorcism or...
Well, if someone's possessed, in the Diocese of Tulsa, I'm what's called a stable exorcist, which means anybody who comes to me, I automatically have faculties to do a solemn exorcism if I judge it to be so. The other exorcists are what's called ad actum, which means they have to go for each individual case, get permission to do solemn exorcism. But there's a variety of different prayers that a priest can actually do in order to make that determination so that you can get the demon to actually manifest. And then once he manifests, then you go to the bishop and present the case. And in my experience, there's only been one bishop that I presented the case to, and he just says, well, I'm not going to do this. And I said, what? He says, well, I've never given permission for this for the 12 years I've been a bishop. I'm not going to start now. But I'm like, well, why not? He says, well, I believe in the devil, but I just don't think he's in my diocese. Like, okay. So the point being is my experience is that the bishops, if you present, first of all, the bishops choose a guy they can trust. So they already know from their experience with you, the people that you bring to them, you know, your success rate, whether people were liberated, whether they turned out to be actual possession cases. But I never heard the bishop and asked for faculties unless I was really certain, because I saw some clearly preternatural. Now I don't have to worry about it so much, but I still don't proceed to solemn exorcism until I see that. But you can do other things in order to get it to get the demon to manifest, and then from there you can make the determination just through other kinds of prayers and exorcism.
So if like a demon is causing a physical condition like that, that's supposed to be assist with that person's strengthening of their character. So should the person, if they think that that's a possibility occurring, seek medical treatment to try to resolve?
Oh yeah. You always seek medical treatment because demons' influence over you is by degree. So sometimes people can have a medical condition from a diabolic cause, but they may not have sufficient influence to counteract the reactions of the medication. So when they're put on the medication actually works for the person, or will at least help them to some degree. Then once you get the demon out, then they can fully heal. But you always seek the medical treatment. So, and that's one of the real differences between the Catholic approach and the Protestant approach. The Protestant approach is you whack the guy in the head and say, don't go to a doctor, you're fine, you're healed, right? The Catholics don't do that at all. In fact, usually before we do any of that, I'll pray over people that have those kinds of conditions just to see if it works. But I always tell people, no, you got to go see your doctor. Never tell anybody not to see the doctor. Yes.
My question has to do with same-sex attraction. I have someone in my family with that, and I understand that trauma is usually what brings that about.
99.9% of cases in men and women.
So is that also probably demonic?
Yes, there is a demon of homosexuality. In men, his name is Asmodeus. In women, it's Lilith or Leviathan, depending on the particular brand of lesbianism. They can cause same-sex attraction, but without the trauma. So, for example, one guy was doing an exorcism over who was a married man, had a beautiful wife, beautiful young children. He was a totally normal guy, never had any traumatic experience in the past. And he says, I keep hearing this name Asmodeus. The demon keeps calling out Asmodeus, Asmodeus. So in the exorcisms, you say prayers to isolate the demons from each other so that they can't empower each other. And so after the session, I asked him, I said, do you have any homosexual ideation? He said, yes, I do. He said, I have no idea where it comes from. I said, well, now you do. It comes from Asmodeus. However, that is not the case in most people who suffer from it. In most people, in fact, that was a rare kind of thing.
There's another question I have to ask you. I come from the Kansas City area. And
I'm sorry. No, actually, my Kansas.
Anyway, before I moved down here a couple of years ago, there was a group of us who listened to this man who Bishop Ben had talked with a lot and asked him to do his, I can't remember what it's called, liberations or...
Oh, yeah.
And we were...
Like deliverance prayers and stuff? Was it deliverance prayers?
Yeah. With people, not actual exorcisms, but deliverances. Is that something that is something that is advisable, or should you leave it to the priests who've been fully trained in all of that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's, in other words, is participating in deliverance work with, say, like lay people and the like, advisable? Is that it? Rather than, just sticking with the priest? It depends on what they're doing. If they're imposing their hands on your head, or if they are, say, commanding the demons to leave, I highly recommend you get away from them. Because they are unprotected, they don't have the authority to do so, and they're going to get their claw cleaned, and they may get your claw cleaned in the process. I actually know 2 people who became possessed from lay people laying their hands on them. Second, I tell people you're better off just sticking with a priest, or if the bishop gives the deacon permission to do those things, a deacon, because of the fact that the priest has the authority from the bishop to do so. As far as imposition of hands, that should really only be done by a bishop, or priest, sorry. Because a priest and a bishop, there's a funny joke about bishops were going into a council meeting one time, and one of them started dying, and they all started looking around and said, quick, call a priest. Anyway, the deacon's hands are not consecrated. The priest's hands are consecrated. That's why they're sacramentals. That's why they have the power to drive demons out. Lay people's hands do not have that power. And so to use them as they do have that power is superstition.
Well, I don't think it was anyone laying their hands on this person, but it was, they asked the demon's name, and I didn't.
If it's a layman, I just don't think that's really appropriate. In fact, the Vatican has been pretty clear they don't want lay people doing those kinds of things. If you're going to deliverance ceremonies where the lay people are just praying with you, not over you, but just praying with you, asking God to help you deliver you from anything. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as the person's not asking for anything whack. But usually there's nothing wrong with that. It's when they want to start doing the things that are really proper to a priest that's a problem. Yes?
You mentioned Lilith. I was reading up on that once because I hear these things. People read the book of Enoch, and then you come up with a movie like this Noah, the movie with Russell Crowe with rock monsters. And Lilith is, to a lot of people real, and they think it really happened. And when I looked into it, I found out the history of it. But what I'm asking you is, well, for your opinion on that, first off, is, was she really the first Eve? Just for your opinion, but I looked up for myself.
That's my opinion. The tradition of the church is clear she wasn't.
Yeah. So she was always a demon.
That's correct.
And that's probably where they got it from, because of that type of demon that it is.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you ever encountered Native American or shaman spirits who maybe had an open door with a demonic blessing of maybe consecrated males, firstborn male sons, and Native American line?
Yeah. Not in possession so much. You see a lot. So you see other problems like diabolic oppression, things like that. Yes.
Do you have to be Catholic to be exorcised?
No. In fact, there's some real funny stories about that. But
I have three short questions. The bells in church, during the consecration when the bells are rung, it was my impression that that's when the Holy Spirit comes.
yes, that's right. Yeah.
So that doesn't have anything to do with the bells.
No, it's a distinct kind of a thing. But yeah.
And do demons have a different voice than the person who's possessed?
They do.
Every time.
No, well, sometimes I'll use the person's voice, but if they get a little obnoxious, I'll force them to speak in their own voice. Sometimes I'll force them to speak in their own voice to get a sense of who and what they are. Yeah.
And how do you see what God has done to the demons? You said that
You see it physically.
Yeah, how's it?
By the manifestation, it's just like, it's analogous to if I walked up to you and smacked you over the head with a baseball bat. I would see what happened. It's the same thing with them. When you ask Christ to do acts, or if you command them or sever something, you will physically see the demon react to it.
Through that person.
Through the person. Yeah.
That demon's name for the male same-sex?
Asmodeus. Yes.
How do you then, especially as healthcare providers who deal with people that may potentially have some sort of possession, how do you then protect yourself?
Come to tomorrow's session and you'll find out. Yes.
Is slaying of the spirits and speaking in tongues, is that all?
Oh. Always someone who has to ask this question. The reason I say that is because every time I do this, there's always somebody who argues with me, and it's because they don't know the first basic aspects of theology. In the church's tradition, by the way, again, we're back to tradition. In the church's tradition, there are two kinds of graces. The first is graces which make you pleasing to God. So there's two kinds of graces. Those which make you pleasing to God, and those which are gratuitously given. The ones that make you pleasing to God are sanctifying grace, that's the indwelling of the Blessed Trinity in your soul, and actual grace, which enlightens the mind and strengthens the will in order to do the right thing. Then there's gratuitous graces, and these gratuitous graces deal with things like the charismatic gifts, as well as things like vocation to the priesthood, things of that sort. Okay. The charismatic graces, insofar as they are gratuitously given, the fathers of the church, the doctors of the church, the entire church itself, it's actually defined in Trent that graces gratuitously given are incapable of being merited. You cannot pray for them, and God gives them to you. You cannot offer something up to get them. You can't do anything to get them. They are gratuitous, purely on the side of God. It says it right in Scripture, He gives them to him as he wills, which means that there's nothing you can do. So people say, oh, well, you can give the gift of tongues if you just sit here and open yourself up to the Spirit. It's, I should have bought a Honda. I'm sorry, but it's not going to work that way. Because the church has defined that these things cannot be gained that way. This came into the Catholic Church from the Pentecostals who did not have a proper theology of grace. So when they thought that you could just do these things and then you would get them. And then, of course, there was all these misinterpretations of St. Paul where these things are talked about. Okay. That being the case, the worst case of possession that I ever had was a woman who asked for the gift of tongues, and she got it. There are three kinds of gifts. When you talk about tongues, there's three kinds. The first is for instance, if you're talking about tongues, there's three kinds. First is the authentic. And in Scripture, we see it playing itself out. There's two kinds. The first is the person speaks their language, so you have language A, but the other person hears language B. So when Peter got up there and started preaching, everybody from all over the place had heard their own language. The second is that God infuses in you the knowledge of the language, so you actually know what you're saying. To keep that in mind. So you speak the language that's infused in you, and the person hears that language. So in the case of Philip, when he goes to see the Enoch, God gives him the gift of tongues so that he can actually go and actually evangelize the eunuch. Okay. Now, what is that? Why is this the case? The reason it's the case that you actually know what you're saying is because God, St. Thomas says, there's a principle. God always uses an instrument according to the nature of the nature of that instrument. We are intelligent creatures. God doesn't use us in a way when we're supposed to be doing something volition or voluntary or speech or things like that sort. He doesn't use us unless we know what we're doing. He infuses the knowledge, and then from there we can actually know what we're doing. That knowledge of knowing what you're doing is how you distinguish it from the diabolic form. The diabolic form is there's a speech pattern, an authentic pattern of speech. There's speech coming out, language coming out of the person's mouth, and they don't know what they're saying. That's what I talked about earlier. Then there were some human studies where they did some studies where they found out there's a human form. And what this human form is they say it's not even really a language. What they found out is that the people that were doing this, so speaking in tongues, and it was purely human, it wasn't one of these other two, is a person who didn't know what they were saying because they weren't saying anything. And they discovered that by close and scientific analysis, that the patterns of speech that they talked with normally as an individual were showing up in the same thing, just a little bit jumbled around. It was just purely human. That's just purely human. Now, people say, I pray to God in my gift of tongues. Let me ask you this. If someone came up to you and just started speaking to you, what would you think? Like, crazy. Yeah, okay. Why do they think God doesn't think that? Right? Well, He knows what's in my heart. Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with what's coming out of your mouth. The second thing is this is dangerous because doing this, in this particular case, the demon is speaking through the people, but when you say, I just open myself up to the Spirit and then the stuff comes out, there's a name for that. It's called channeling. It's where you open yourself up and let the spirits speak through you. This is one of the reasons why I tell people that's why this woman became possessed, because it was a superstitious behavior that she was engaging in, and as a result she became possessed as a result of it. I cannot tell you, when I was in the Diocese of Omaha, because the first place I was an exorcist was for the Archdiocese of Omaha, I cannot tell you how many people I had to clean up from the charismatic renewal. To be clear, I have the highest estimation of some of these people because they're actually serious about their spiritual life, they're trying to do the right thing, they're one of the few people who takes spiritual warfare seriously, etc. But what they're doing is an adoption from the Protestants and has nothing to do with the history of the Catholic Church. Nothing. And as a result of that, it's really dangerous. So being slain in the Spirit, there is no such charismatic gift. It's not real. In fact, I think a lot of it's just psychological, frankly. So, yes?
Question. Is there a demon that specifically attacks marriages?
There are demons that attack different facets of the marriage, like the matrimonial union or the fidelity of the spouses or things like that. So, yes.
You're talking about the charismatic gifts. One of the things I find just from knowing people is that you have people in American they call a spirit guide, and then you get the Christians and some people here consider themselves Catholic, and suddenly it's their guardian angel that they have a name for. It's Saint Michael, it's Saint Gabriel, Saint Raphael, and they act like they're getting like sort of like prophetic, messages like you're demonized or something like
Yes,
that. And
yes.
the thing is, it's like I don't even know. It's like how do I tell them how to test the spirit? They really believe it, and they put pictures of Jesus on their Facebook page and.
Oh, there's an
It's
easy
an
way to
epidemic.
test it. You ignore it. No, I'm dead
I
serious.
just wish I could do something and like that maybe you were
That's
supposed
what
to.
John of the Cross says. He says when you test the spirit, you ignore it. If it's from God, he'll still continue because he's omnipotent. If it's from Satan, he'll lose interest and leave. In fact, there's a form of diabolical oppression where it's such a high level of oppression that the demons actually chatter at the person even though they're not possessing them or obsessing them. And so you just tell them, ignore it. Just ignore it. It'll go away. And it usually does within a week. So the point being is that the other side of it is that remember when I was talking about how demons have access to your emotions, the cognitive power and all this stuff, the brain, all that. This is why the church has always, always, always said you never rely on your emotions or how you feel or your lower faculties for the determination of your spiritual life, because the demons have access to that and they can make you feel consolations in relationship to things that are spiritually disordered. So you have to be very careful about all that stuff. That's why John the Cross says just ignore it. If it's from God, it'll still happen. If it's not from God, nothing's going to happen. Yes.
How often does a demon actually identify itself, or is that just Hollywood?
Actually, in most cases of possession that I've found that last any more than one session, they usually will tell who they are. Usually.
Is the name Alistair or anything?
I haven't had that guy, but someone might have.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to know, how do our guardian angels interact with demons that may be trying to oppress us? Or do they?
Yeah, they do. It just depends on what God has determined. So they can block them, they can remove them from the activity of the person's life, they can literally push them out. It just depends on what God allows, and they can protect us from them so that they can't gain access. The guardian angels have the capacity to perfectly protect us. It's just that God communicates to them what and how they are to protect you.
Well, is it a good idea to have, a devotion to your guardian?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I thank them every morning and
Oh, yeah.
ask them to.
That's one of the real problems. Most people don't have one. I mean, most people go their entire life never developing a decent relationship.
Say
But
most people don't have one?
no, most people don't have a good relationship with their guardian angel, and so as a result, they go to most people don't have a guardian angel. And so they'll go their entire life, they get to the end of their life, and they haven't even developed a relationship with this guy that's been in their life, been within their entire life. I think that's a little odd.
I think everybody needs to listen to, go on YouTube and listen to your one on guardian angels. It's awesome.
It's really good.
Yes.
How about wearing the Benedictine mantle?
Oh yeah. We'll get into that tomorrow. Yes.
If the demons identify themselves, how can the guardian angels do that?
They do, but rarely. Whereas when the demons manifest, you beat it out of them, they tell you because they have to. They don't want to, they have to. Whereas the guardian angels rarely identify themselves, rarely. Although it has happened, even in my own life, not personally myself, but what happened was one time there was this case where this woman was possessed, and she calls me up and she says, I'm pinned to the floor and I can't move. And I'd already been working with her for a little bit. She hands the phone to one of our assistants that was sitting there. She says, yes, we can't get her to move. And I said, well, I can't talk to you right now. I'm going to have to call you later. Because I was just about to get on an airplane, if I remember correctly. And I'm standing in an airport. I don't think I'm meant to be shouting exorcisms into the phone. So what happens is, but you don't shout at them anyway. So what I did is it was only 1 hour flight. I got off the flight, I called her back, and said, you still think? She said, yes. So I said the prayers to get the demon to loosen up, which she did very quickly, and then she says, I have to go. Now, before I got on the airplane, what I did is I said to the guardian angel of my priest, because when you're ordained a priest, you get another guardian angel. So I said to him, I said, go and tend to her and take care of her. So she gets back on the phone. This is before I got on the airplane, before I actually got her freed up. So she hangs up. 5 minutes later, she calls back. She said, I hadn't been to the bathroom in 5 hours. I'm like, oh. And then she says, and by the way, did you send the guardian angel of your priest? priest is him. And I said, yes, how did you know? He said, he appeared to me and held my hand. She was actually, in other words, he communicated to her who he was. That is very rare. You don't see that happening too often. So, some people know their guard, like Dr. Pugh always likes Dr. Pugh. Yes.
I have two questions. One is just clarifying about the tongues. You did say that if someone has truly the gift of tongues, they will understand what they are speaking.
Yes.
Okay, the second thing is, because coming from the Protestant world, being like filled with the Spirit and filled with the Holy Spirit is huge. Is there a Catholic teaching of what that would look like in the Catholic?
Yes, there's a book called The Sanctifier by Martinez.
Is he accompanied by a demon as well, or would he ever
Almost
possess
always. I've only seen one case where that wasn't the case.
And last one. In case of adopted children, can a generational spirit from the adopted child come and cause a possession in the family with the adopted child?
Yes. One of the things that I often do is I recommend, especially depending on where they're adopting them from, or if they're adopting them because the parents had specific issues like alcohol or drug abuse or things like that, I'll often recommend, I'll just say, well, the kid's normal, don't worry about it. Because the general principle with demons is if you see something, if you don't see something, it's probably not there. Probably not. So if you have adopted kids and you don't notice anything, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if you start noticing it, you might want to have any generational, take it to a priest who can break any generational spirits in relationship with it. Also, pray to Our Lady of Sorrow to ask what the generational spirit you're dealing with before you go see the priest, if you can easily have something maybe to give to show them. Yes?
Are these free Benedictine medals already blessed?
That I have no clue. You have to ask whoever.
They are exercised by Father Dennis.
Okay.
The old rite.
There you go.
Yes.
Yes.
He was on trying to find out what spirit you're supposed to, how do you get the name?
The name, you don't want to get his proper name. What you want is his behavior. So if he's making you angry, or if he's making you just say spirit of anger, I bind you. Or like if your kids, if it's spirit of disobedience or something like that. So you look at the behavior, then that's the name you give it to it, and that's what you bind.
There's a show on TV, Long Island Medium. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a lady. She says she's Catholic. She can see dead people, and she'll tell them, like, oh, this is what your dead relative is saying. Can you comment on that kind of thing?
Yeah, being a medium is another form of diabolic channeling, and it's an avenue. That's what seances are. Basically, what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to the spirits talking through you or communicating with you. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of them think that, there's good spirits out there that you can communicate with. Yeah, they're called angels, but God is the one who determines when and when they cannot. You can't do anything to determine that. So, whereas if you try to do something to set that up, it's a superstitious act, and that's when you open yourself up, the demons can get involved. So in her particular case, I watched her just a little bit just to get a sense of her. I think my take on it is that she's one of these people that's extremely adept at reading situations and people and can kind of get stuff and do certain things. Whether there's anything that's diabolic about it, I'm not real sure because I haven't seen anything like it, but she's just really adept at reading people. The other thing is, too, they do the normal tricks. There's somebody here whose parent just recently died, and you're suffering from it. Well, you can say that about any group this size, right? So you just have to watch for those kinds of things. So I tell people to avoid those kinds of shows, avoid the paranormal shows, because going around looking at that stuff. Another big thing that was in vogue for a long time was going to cemeteries and trying to summon the dead, that kind of thing. You just open yourself up to get whacked. Okay. Yes.
You said something today, and we talked about it too, about possessors not being demons, but souls.
Yes.
I had no idea that was a possibility. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, what it is that, okay, basically this is the theological speculation, so it's purely at that level. This is the theological speculation as to why and how they can do it. That the restriction of our wills to only being able to move things in our own body is a divine decree. St. Thomas says that the will is a universal power. And so there is some speculation that things like telekinesis and things of that sort were common, Adam and Eve had them. And that at the fall, God truncated it and and restricted it by removed their ability to affect things outside of themselves. So once you're released from the body, the will still retains that universal power. So it has the ability to affect other material things, God permitting. We know this to be the case because of the fact that Our Lady does it, the saints do it, and things of that sort. So in relationship to enlightening our mind or putting something in our imaginations, etc. Okay. And there are certain instances where angels have actually moved other people's bodies during times of distress or what have you. So we know that those things, not angels, yes, angels have. But with people, the idea is that when people are damned and they're particularly bad, under certain circumstances, God will allow them to come back and be able to influence in the same manner that a demon does. So, now there's a small percentage, very small percentage of exorcists who just says, no, they're just demons, they're just faking their people. No, there's a real distinction, because one of the, at least in my experience with them, with angels, when it's fallen angels, that is demons, you'll ask them, you'll command them to tell you, well, what were you damned for? It's always a spiritual sin, like pride, envy, something like that. It's always that. Whereas when it's a human being, it's almost always something tangible. So one guy that I knew, that was possessed of this one woman, he was damned for having hung a man. Another woman, or another case was that one of the possessors was her great aunt, and we commanded her to tell, what were you damned for? Promiscuity. So it was funny because every time that she would manifest, all of a sudden the woman's facial features would get really soft and she'd start twirling her hair, and it was just like a little frivolous here. But the point is that there have to be something that it has to be particularly bad. In the case of Aneesa, that she was possessed by, if it was accurate, Hitler, Nero, parish priest, as I mentioned, who they found was particularly bad. So they have to. It's not just like I said yesterday, Aunt Bessie, who happened to didn't want to go to mass on Sundays. It's not usually that. It's usually something that's really bad. Even though that is more simple. Yes.
With a doctor having a patient, or in my case, a therapist having a client, does that give us any authority or not? Okay.
Although once you adopt someone, in other words, it's a legal thing. So once you adopt somebody legally, you can do it. If you have power of attorney over somebody and they become incompetent, once they lose that competence, then the authority would kick in. So it has to do, so in that particular case, no. But you can do it in the other way, where you just say, in fact, I'll recommend this often to people who have therapists who come to me and say, I think my client has diabolic problem. So I'll just say, well, one of the ways you can find out is just say the binding prayer, but don't say it as a command. Just say it, Jesus asks you to find the spirit of action. You can say it mentally. You don't have to say it out loud. You just say it mentally. Let's see if you notice a change. Yes?
Is there any way for us to know which saint is a specific nemesis to a certain demon?
Not without asking him. Or unless you're an exorcist, you happen to know it because of case study. So, yes.
Once your children are grown and married, do you still have authority over them?
You do.
Yes.
How that plays itself out, is a little different. The answer is yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, because I'm really confused. The father has a command over the Catholic.
That's correct.
He's the one that is commanding prayers, or just only the priests?
No, he can use them over his family. The mother can use them over the children. The wife, because she has rights over his body by virtue of the marital contract, she can say it over him too. Does that make sense? Over her husband.
And one more thing. I just received an email, and I can't remember who it's from, a Catholic organization. It says there's a new series coming out called Lucifer.
Oh, yeah.
And the devil is portrayed as a nice guy for the devil.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he's always trying to get the people that are under his influence to make everybody else think he's a great guy. Yes.
About that authority of the binding, so say you have a legal divorced, but you're still married to the spouse of the church, do you have authority?
The authority comes from the sacrament, not from the civil effects. Yes.
Okay, this is kind of a broader question, but when you look at the Illuminati or the enlightened ones, that would be, basically human agents of the devil on the earth.
Right.
They're pushing the New World Order,
yes.
Currency, food, industrial medical complex, corporate profiteering, population control, other things.
Yes.
One of the things that, they say is they have control over Washington, with the Washington oblique there, or the oblique in Europe, and the oblique in Rome, of having control over religion, money, and war. The Novus Order, New World Order, there's a lot of people I say that they have infiltrated the Catholic Church in a major way. Could that be true? And if so, what do we do for spiritual work?
Yeah, I mean, the documentation, I think, is pretty clear that they did. In fact, the infiltration of the Catholic Church has already testified publicly before Congress by Bella Dodd. I mean, Bella Dodd said that the Freemasons, the communists, were very closely together, but she said we flooded the Catholic seminaries. We've got over 1,000 communists into the Catholic seminaries in this country alone. So, is there an influence? Yes, there actually is. The place of the greatest spiritual power is also, or the greatest spiritual influence is also, for good, is also the place of the greatest diabolic attack. So it just makes sense that they would be attacking. So the point being is it there? Yes. These things are all predicted anyway. All these things, the New World Order is in effect predicted by the saints who talk about how governmental structures and financial systems would come under this control of a single agency, but that was necessary in order for the Antichrist. So that's just all that means. I mean, so is it there, the spiritual warfare? Yeah, it's there. You just have to pray to keep yourself protected from your family so that any of the effects of it don't occur. But that's about all that you can really do, because these things are, you can pray against them and you can do certain things, but they are largely out of our hands. The one thing I keep telling people is, it's really funny. I was a mechanic for about 25 years off and on for my father, because I would go home and I would work with him ever since I was a teenager. I mean, but even after I was a priest, he would get busy, so I'd come down and help him out when I was home on vacation. And so I'm one of these guys that just likes working with my hands. So I went and I bought an assembly torch set. And I would go to get the balls, and I get to the location. I'm in my casting, and behind me is assembling oxygen bottle. And this guy, when we're loading it, he just asked me, he says, hey, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. He says, what do you think about the way the world is going right now? And I told him, it's in free fall. And he says, yeah, that's what I've noticed. Since about 2008, roughly, this thing is literally spiraling down with nobody putting any brakes on it whatsoever. There is literally no public agency that's trying to slow this thing down that is effective in any manner whatsoever. And I think that's just kind of generally where we're at. And some people ask me, well, what do you think about that? I said, well, I just think it's God setting us up to get spanked. Because we're bad children, He needs to spank us in this country. So what that's going to look like, I don't know. I really don't want to speculate too much on that. So, yeah.
When you're doing the exorcisms and everything, you're saying you're speaking to the demons. Are they speaking through the other person's voice, or
sometimes it's their voice, sometimes it's the demon's voice. I've only heard demons speak directly to me without any kind of physical agency once. They usually don't do that. Christ restricts that usually. So what they do is they'll move the vocal cords and stuff and actually speak through the person. So, yeah.
When I have authority over my nephew who comes to stay with my husband and myself every summer, he comes from a broken home, divorced parents, and my brother's on the road, he's a trucker, and so he's not in the house with us, so he gives us charge over his son. So would I have authority over my nephew?
Not the spiritual authority that would let you do the binding prayers.
How?
By command. So you just ask Christ.
Have to be asking.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Response to her question, could she ask the father to extend his authority over her?
No, it's not delegatable.
Okay.
Yes.
When you said like we're in free fall, I think we have to start not not being closed in ourselves and merely protect. I believe everything that you said, and I think it's wonderful. But I think we have to reach out.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a problem because the Holy Father says we have to risk ourselves and smell like the sheep. And I can give you an example. I only told this story to Richard Holland here. I was in Japan, in Hokkaido, as a catechist, and the pastor told me, I could go to Shiganotani, this coal mining town, and I had 8 people. We'd sit in a room on the floor, which, was the bedroom and everything else. One room serves everything. My problem was I taught the catechism, and it was in Japanese, and then used the scriptures. They had the scriptures there, and so I could relate them to Christ. However, when I looked on the wall, there was a 5-foot wide poster on there. There was a suntory. The woman was totally naked with a suntory whiskey bottle right at the proper place. You see, obviously it looked like a phallic symbol, but she'd be looking at me all the time as I'm teaching, okay? Now, I cannot stop that because in Japan, you can't tell people how to decorate their houses. You're ruining it. So my thing was to just keep teaching.
How much it makes it taste?
This is the devil looking, as it were. Okay? And right near the time when we were finishing and they were getting ready for baptism, I went in, and lo and behold, there was 2 opal pictures there, the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Sacred Heart of Mary. I didn't say anything. After the class was over, he said, what we had on the wall after your teaching here didn't speak to us anymore. That was the suntory. After that, I went to Oyubari to start out. Well, the teacher would invite me into the home at night. And of course, they had these liter bottles of beer. And in Japan, you cannot pour your own beer. He has to pour it for you, and I have to take care of him. And so after I get loaded with beer, I said, man, I can't, I couldn't drink it anymore. Well, he thought I wanted whiskey, so I'll come to Suntory. The wife was the Suntory lady now, clothed, however, and I had this whiskey. Well, by the time I left the house, I said I had things to do the next day. I was radiating. I had to walk in the snow. Now, the snow was 2 meters deep, and we boarded up the windows on the first floor. And so I was radiating, and I remember telling a priest, I said, this boozing for Christ is kind of hard. What I'm bringing out is what the Holy Father is saying. You kind of risk yourself a little bit. And that side can wear you out, you know what I'm saying? And I never was told anything about the devil, and I believed in the devil and angels and prayed.
Yeah, it's true that you have to, okay. There's a distinction between, you don't risk your family. But it's true that it's based upon our own particular circumstances, that we might be in a circumstance where we do have to go out of ourselves in order to help somebody. You just have to make sure that we're not putting ourselves at spiritual risk of committing any kind of grave sin or anything. But I agree, you do have to help people, but my basic point is that you have to, in fact, I think what you said brings up a very important point. Right now, I think it's gotten so bad that trying to get the overall, the governmental structure and all these things straightened out, you're not going to get those things straightened out. It's got to be on a person-by-person basis. That's where you've got to deal with people. And when you see people are open, then that's when you make the entrance. Yes?
You mentioned something about the Freemasons just a little bit ago. We had a family member a couple generations back who was involved, and on a very low level, not high levels, so I doubt he knew anything about high level. So I just wondered about our family's vulnerability.
All they have to do is enter the lowest level, and your family can become subject to the Freemasonic curse. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have it, but you want to say the prayers to break the Freemasonic curse.
There's a specific prayer.
There's a set of prayers, yeah.
Is that on your website?
No, but you can email me through the website and ask for it. Yes.
Yes, we have authority to bind under God.
No. That's a common opinion. That most, because the godparents' role is to correct, not to command. So as a result of that, they don't think that, most exorcists do not think they do. So, yes.
How common is possession? And then another question, is yoga really dangerous?
As far as the possession is, it's still fairly uncommon, but it's becoming more common. I mean, caseload is increasing because people are just doing a lot of evil things. In fact, it kind of reminds me that, again, that prophecy of St. Francis, where he says, during the time of tribulations, demons will have extraordinary power. It almost seems like to be there. But, so, it's not that common, but it's becoming more common. People ask me, what percentage of the population is probably possessed? It's hard to even tell. Like I said, only 3 out of the 150 people, even that was after a vetting process last year that we looked at, were possessed. So it's not, again, it's not very common. Diabolic obsession, though, I think, is very common. In the sense, it's not like diabolic temptation, but somebody asked me one time, well, what percentage of the population in this country do you think is diabolically obsessed? I said, somewhere probably around 25%. And we personally, the exorcists, tend to think it's because of the rise of pornography and things of that sort. Then, it was shortly after I said that, about 2 weeks after I said that, they came out with a study and said that 22% of college graduates and basically the general population have either seen or are currently seeing a psychologist. So it's about the same kind of statistic. As to yoga. Yoga is, and don't kill the messenger, I'm just telling you what the experts in the history and the practitioners of yoga say it is. They make it very clear that the stretching and the positions in yoga are actual representations of Eastern deities. It says more than once, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, it says all the gods of the Gentiles are demons. It's totally true. Basically what they are is they're representations of demons. I have seen people become possessed through practicing yoga. A lot of people say, well, I think it's fine. I'm just telling you, this is what the thing is in its representation. And so it's an open door. Objectively speaking, it's an open door. I tell people, avoid it. Yes.
Are Jezebel, Delilah, Apollyon the Destroyer real demons?
Yes.
I went to a graduation party and they rented the lodge at the Freemason place. Did I open myself up to infestation by going to that party?
Yes, I've noticed something. Speak to me after. You can, yes, but like I say, if you didn't notice anything after you left, then there's probably nothing there I would worry about. So, yes.
Could you spell that website?
Yeah, it's www.AUXILISTIANORUM. It includes the invocation of Our Lady of Help for Christians. Yes.
Father, could you please tell us what prayers we can say? Say we get invited to somebody's house that we don't know, and we find out that they have got questionable looks, they've got iconography that we don't recognize. It looks like it might be from like the Sumerian period or some old god. And we've obviously found ourselves in a situation where people would worship differently that is of Satan. After we leave the premises, what prayers specifically should we say to protect ourselves from exposing ourselves to something like that?
Well, there's two things. I think one is just ask your guardians to guide you so you don't end up going into houses like that. The second one is while you're there, so if you see something, just say, Michael, protect me, and ask Our Lady to protect you. And usually it will work. So, okay. Yes.
When we say our prayers, say to the saints or to the angels or even this, we say it to ourselves quietly, can they hear,
Yes.
understand?
Yes. The way it works is this. Our thoughts are shrouded from all other intelligent creatures except God. And then God can reveal it to specific people, except God structured into the very nature of angelic communication and also human communication, but it's currently restricted at the moment under certain circumstances, that if you, by your will, direct your thoughts to another intelligent creature, to God, that person hears it.
We can pray for our loved ones in heaven,
Yes, you can pray to them and they'll hear you.
even in our quietness and our angels.
Yes, it's just, it can be done just purely
We can
mentally.
make this command even within ourselves without saying it out loud.
That's correct. So, in the next life, God will lift the veil and you will see even what's in people's minds. So, yes.
So are there any prayers that to be effective need to be spoken out loud, or can they all be prayed mentally, like the auxiliary Christian arm prayers instead?
It just depends on the nature of the thing that you're dealing with. Usually, my experience is if it's said out loud, it usually has a bit more efficacy. But sometimes it just depends on the particular demon. You can do it mentally, and he's hearing you, so you ways. So, yes.
There's a scapular called scapular protection. I don't know what the official name is. I think it came from a venerated possible saint from the late 1800s. Are you familiar with the big purple one?
I am.
I can't
I'm a
find.
big promoter of it, actually.
They're so hard to find online. I'm wondering if it's one of those things that haven't been approved by the church. And I've just been discovering this lately because it's been really effective telling people to get them and they have problems with impurity. It almost like stops the temptations. It's
Yeah, okay. There's a website called sacramentals.org. You just go on there and they actually have them. They kept those people. They've been a big promoter of Mary Julie Jahani, which if you ever get a chance to read her visions, they're quite astounding, actually.
they're like they're $13. I thought they're kind of pricey, probably because they can't find them in too many places.
What are they?
I think it's because they're I think it's because they're extremely hard to come by. They have to be made from scratch, basically. They're not mass produced.
What are they called?
They're called the purple scapular. And basically what the purple scapular is that Mary Julie Jahani asked Christ for a scapular, and he gave her the purple scapular, which is supposed to protect you and your family from the effects of the chastisement. So that's one of the things I recommend to put in your house. You don't have to wear it, just put it in your house.
So you don't, I wear the brown one, so you don't wear both of them.
No, you just put it in your house. Yes.
Well, I have a wonderful grandson who's in med school, which is really difficult. When I know he's having a really hard exam, I ask my guardian angel to be with him.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that okay?
Oh yeah, all the time. We do it all the time. Okay, we better cut it off there. If you'll Leo, I'll give you a blessing. Benedictio Deo omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, et super vos et semper.